Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Recovery. My guest today is Sherry Sutton, Didi Marketing. And there is a lot going on with Sherry. So I want to actually start off before I invite her to join here. So Sherry's a marketing mentor, small business cheerleader, photographer, mom, yogini, and recovery warrior. So Sherry, welcome to the show today. So happy to have you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. This is an honor.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much. I go a few weeks in advance to just kind of keep my eye on who's coming up for interviews. And you were definitely a standout, just the way you present yourself. I really dig, obviously we'll get into the, how to follow you at the end of the show here, but great follow on Instagram. And just such a cool, honest bio, like the way that it's constructed and something. I could just feel your energy and just the way that you were presenting yourself. And you have not disappointed. I've very much enjoyed our 20-minute preamble beforehand. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I think one of the things that we find in recovery is the ability to live our most authentic self, right? I mean, we became addicted because we were afraid of who we were, right? What was going to happen to us if we really were that, right? We were, just living in constant fear. And that's one of the things that once that's gone, the ability to really embrace who you are fully is such a gift and has been my greatest gift in recovery. So being able to be here and talk about it and just I really appreciate that you say that, right? Because that's what I try to put out there is this, this mood of authenticity. And so I'm glad that it's working.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely. 100% it is. And already have a couple notes of a couple of topics I want to come back to. Before we do though, I always give my guests, some time to give a little backstory, get my audience introduced to you. So I really wanted you to take as long as you feel the need to go back as far back into your time machine, for a little Sherry, as far as your earliest exposures to drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be, various addictions that have crossed your paths with. And just give us a little bit of your background about who you are and those origin stories in the relationship with alcohol, please.
Yeah. So my first drunk was at 2. I went around and drank all the champagne out of the glasses that was left at my parents' New Year's party. And I guess they thought that was really hysterical. But looking back on it, I'm like, oh boy, we were destined. Oh, even before that, let's go back in utero.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. This is a good story. So my parents are trying to decide what they're going to name me, right? While they're drinking champagne, because we have pictures of this. My mom's, big belly, and she's got a champagne. It was the 70s. People drank while they were right. It's fine. So they were trying to figure out what they were going to name me. And they're sitting on the stoop of their apartment. And across the street is the liquor store, who my parents were best friends with the liquor store owners. And you'll learn why here in a minute. Rose and Lou, who were my aunt and uncle growing up, right? So they were best friends with these people. They look over at Rose and Lou's store and it says beer, spirits, and sherry. And they went, Sherry, that's a great name for a girl. So I was literally named for the liquor store across the street. I was destined to be an alcoholic, which, by the way, I believe is my greatest gift and my greatest superpower. And so I joke around about it a lot, but I really am so incredibly grateful for being an alcoholic. I'll talk about that more. But, I started drinking really in middle school. I fell in with a group of kids and lack of parental supervision, and they were alcoholics and it was freely available. And I found from a very early age, from the very start, that if I had one, I had 20. I mean, I was gonna, if I had one, I was off to the races, right? And my drinking was like that my entire life. I mean, I never really was able. Every once in a while I could moderate, I'll have one or so. that was pretty rare, right? Like I remember going to parties and I often will remember only like the first 5 minutes. And the next thing I remember, I'm throwing up somewhere. It's the next morning and I don't know what has happened. If I had more than 2 drinks, I went into a complete brown or blackout. And so that I honestly, until I got in recovery, I didn't realize that people didn't drink that way. I thought I drank just the way everybody else did. I thought everyone had 20 drinks, passed out, threw up, ran out before they stopped drinking. I thought that was just totally normal. But I was always getting in trouble. The one thing though is, my trouble wasn't like the normal kind of, I didn't get arrested. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't get a drunk and disorderly, right? I was just so lucky. I would end up like some rando person would have to drive me home from the bar because, God forbid, right? And I have had multiple incidents, of sexual abuse, right, along the way, because I did put myself in positions of, just being vulnerable, not being able to take care of myself. And so, but I never really saw it was my drinking, right? So I drank a lot. I was in with a crowd in middle school. And then I kind of realized like in high school, like I gotta get out of my house, right? My dad was an alcoholic. My sister was an alcoholic. She's 18 years older than I am, was out of my house by the time I was born, actually, because she was just so out of control, a lot of mental illness as well. So, but my dad was a very severe alcoholic, one of those, and similar to me, everything looked fine on the outside, right? He was like, everybody knew him in town and he, ran the local playhouse and all that stuff. But what people didn't see was he came home at 6 and, drank himself into a stupor every single day. And so I was like, my mom was a good codependent and my dad was a good alcoholic. It was like the perfect alcoholic family to grow up in. And I got to high school and I was like, I got to get out of here. Right. And so I actually like stopped drinking, got in with a really good group of kids, got my grades up, got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to go to college. The drinking kicked in again there. I did what every good alcoholic does, and I got a job in a restaurant.
Oh, of course.
And then because I'm, an overachieving alcoholic, I had to not only like work at the restaurant, but then I had to become a manager because then I'd have like complete access to the alcohol and never have to buy it. Right. So that was great. So I had like free alcohol. And I can't believe I never got a DUI. I never I ran on my car off the road a couple of times, but only like, so you'd have to get a new tire. Like it was never anything crazy. Right. But, I graduated from college. I everything looked okay on the outside, but I started my professional career, in my 20s. I didn't drink a lot. I had developed kind of a chronic illness and wasn't able to drink much because of the medications I was on. And so but when I drank, it was back to that. Like when I drank all the way. And I just kept having consequences from that, but I never really realized that it was my drinking. But I was always plagued with the emotional sides of being an alcoholic, right? I mean, that's just sort of the drunkalog piece of it. But I was always plagued with, this sense of no one likes me. I'm dorky and I don't fit in. And I still feel like that all the time. Now, when that happens, I go, yeah, okay, whatever. But I've always felt like that, right? I always had to be competitive. I always had to talk more to be, the smarter person in the room. I had to get multiple degrees. I had to achieve. I had to get the next car. I had to get the next whatever. And I just never felt comfortable in my own skin. And I realized that was a lot of the drinking, right? It was a lot of the drinking. It was a lot of the get really deep into a relationship really fast and then throw it away, right? Because I just didn't know how to deal with it. It was a lot of the same thing with jobs, right? Things were disposable. As soon as it got too hard or too close, I was out. And it was always somebody else's fault. And it wasn't it wasn't me. So I lived my life like that for, for a long time. And I, around, so my son was born in 2010. So now fast forward, a long time. So now I'm in my early 40s. And my ex-husband and I move from New Jersey to Dallas, Texas. The marriage was not going well, in large part because of my selfishness that was fueled, that fueled my alcoholism. So we moved here to Dallas, Texas, where I still am today. And I let my business go. I decided I was gonna be the good wife, right? And I was gonna play by the rules, and I wasn't gonna be the one who wanted tattoos and drank too much and was really loud at the parties, right? I was gonna button it up, right? So pulling a geographic is the best way to do that. So I leave everything behind, we both did, and we moved to Dallas, and it took 48 hours before I was drinking sun up to sundown. And I didn't know anybody. We kind of moved to a little bit of a remote, now it's not, but at the time it was sort of on the outskirts of Dallas, and it was a little bit remote. And, I just lost my mind. And what was the cure, right? What was the cure? An unhappy marriage, realized you made a huge mistake by moving and leaving, leaving your business and all your friends.
Yeah.
What's the solution, right? The only solution I ever knew was alcohol. So I went for it, and needless to say, within a year and a half, of a really, really rough year and a half, of which I remember fairly little. My husband had left me, taken the big house that we bought, when we moved out here, right? He got the big house. My husband left. Thank God I didn't lose partial custody of my son, thank God I didn't get arrested or DUI, because I should have on a daily basis, right? And I was like living in an apartment, unemployed, no friends. The only friends I had met were fellow alcoholics, right? And I didn't know what I was like, what am I going to do? And the drinking that had escalated for the last year and a half got even worse. And so, I truly was drinking like sun up to sundown and well beyond. And I remember my last drunk, I kind of got a sense that I was starting to drink too much. And I also looked at my life, and I realized that I had become my father, because as I mentioned earlier, my father was an alcoholic. Well, when I graduated high school, my mother left, right? He ended up out of the big house in the little shitty apartment, right? Drinking on his own with not very many pieces of furniture, drinking on his own all day long, couldn't hold a job. And I had this realization, like, oh my God, like I've turned into my father. And I talked to a therapist about it, and very well-meaning. He was like, well, you're going through a hard time. I wouldn't worry about it. Which just gave me permission, by the way, what?
Yeah.
Therapist says it's good.
Yeah, you're just like, whew, I thought I had a problem there for a sec, right?
Right. Clearly I haven't turned into my father.
No.
My sister, who had died of the disease, 8-ish years earlier from liver failure, right? I'm not them. I'm unemployed in a city where I have no friends, but I still have like a nice apartment. I still look decent, I'm still dating cute guys, and it's fine, but I could see where it was going, and I just didn't know what I was going to do. And so I remember two things happened kind of the last few months. It was New Year's, and there was a special on wine at the liquor store. And so I bought a case, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is going to last me 6 months, right? I'll have a few bottles for home, and then I'll have, some extra bottles to take when I go to people's houses or whatever, right? And it was gone in maybe 2 weeks, probably a week. Plus the vodka. See, so I only had so much wine, because then I was drinking too much. So I couldn't open another bottle of wine. So then I would move to the vodka, and then that was probably a little bit too much. So then I would move to the limoncello, right? Because that's an appropriate after dinner drink, right? When you've had 2 bottles of wine plus a couple martinis plus, right?
Right. Of course.
I mean, you have to end the night with limoncello.
Completely logical.
Right. So all the wine's gone. And I'm like, I didn't take any of that anywhere. Like that was all me. And so I was just starting to get an inkling that I was drinking too much, but I went to a St. Patrick's Day party. So this is now almost 7 years ago. So St. Patrick's Day, 2016, I went with, alcoholics find other alcoholics. So when I moved to Dallas, I found this little group of alcoholics, this one woman who I didn't know very well, but she was like, we're going to the parade, come over. We start at like 10 in the morning. And so I decide, well, I'm going to have one, right? I'm just going to have one. But what one was this filled to the top with straight vodka, but then it was only one, right?
Right. Of course. Yeah.
I don't remember most of the day. But I was dating somebody and I was, he was like screaming at me as I'm driving home, and like I was trying to get an Uber. I was passed out on the sidewalk for a while, and now I'm like 42. Like, what am I? Like, I wake up, I'm like, what am I doing? And I can't even. I'm like, I don't even know how to get myself out of here. I have no idea where my friends are. I have no idea how I got here. So I try to get an Uber, but I didn't have the app. So I download the app. And I guess I couldn't figure out how to get an Uber. So I applied to be an Uber driver by accident that night. So, it was a good reminder for me, because I got texts from Uber for a year. Jeez. Don't forget to fill out your application to be a driver. And I was like, okay, recovery is absolutely the place I need to be. So that was on a Saturday. Sunday was, lost to the hangovers. I'm sure all of your listeners know those days. And Monday I was at home and I was taking quizzes online about whether or not I'm an alcoholic. Because what do you do when you don't know if you're an alcoholic? You consult the Google G, and the Google G will tell you everything you need to know. And so they're all coming back positive, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea what to do. I didn't know anyone in recovery. I didn't know, I knew one person I had met who was in recovery. And I'm like, what do I do? And I took a break and I went over to Facebook, and one of my yoga teachers from New Jersey posted that she was 90 days sober. And she saved my life. She saved my life because I wrote to her and I said, what do I do? And she's like, this is what you do. There's a meeting down the street from you. Here's a meeting finder. There's a meeting down the street from you. And I was in that meeting at 5:30 that day, and, started my recovery journey immediately. And I'm just so lucky and so blessed, because and you and I talked about this before the show, but we don't talk about it enough, right? The people who are in recovery just, and for good reasons, many of them, but we just don't talk about it, right? We don't know what to do. And if people are in trouble, they don't know who to go to. And, I've now written an international best-selling book on my sobriety journey. I've been on a lot of, a number of podcasts, and so honored to be on this one. But I always get people coming to me afterwards, like, thank you for telling my story. Please, what do I do? Right. And the reason why I'm so passionate about doing that is it's what happened to me, and it's what saved my life, right? Was someone being willing to be vulnerable enough to publicly speak about being sober. And so I just feel so grateful that now I get to do that.
Yeah. Fantastic story. Thank you. I have a few, topics to circle back to you. And it's such a powerful thing, even the way that you said it. It's like for people to hear their story in you. I'm sure by the time you were going to meetings, you were hearing at least components of your story in other people. And there's just this like relief, this idea that you're not alone in this. And just to quickly share my similar in the way that, I went to my first meeting, and it was literally a friend of mine that had been going to NA and AA meetings, and we'd had a falling out, big surprise over substances. And I'd reached out to him because I had heard just through mutual friends that he had been cleaning up, and same kind of thing. I reached out to him. I say, can you take me one of these things? Right. And we get to the parking lot, and I'm like, I thought, that was terrifying just to get to the parking
Oh,
lot. I think I'm cured. I'm good. Like, this scared me enough. It's one of these things, right? If he hadn't done this, we wouldn't be talking right now. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, we'll go in together. It'll be fun.
yeah.
And then as soon as
Oh,
we
but
got
by
in
the
there,
way, we weren't scared when it came to driving a bullet, like a multiple ton bullet,
right,
through on the streets at 70 miles an hour drunk. Like, that didn't scare us, but
right.
like going to a meeting did.
Exactly. Yeah. Isn't that strange? And I want to get into like some of the justifications and the attempts at moderation, or, you know what I mean? Or just more so the justification part is just, they can be so out of whack, but at the time it feels completely normal. Right. And you definitely had some similarities or whatever with that. But yeah, by the time I got to the meeting, it was like, as soon as the guy started talking, and it just realizing there's 12 other people that were in the similar, different phases of the same kind of recovery or whatever I was trying to do. I was day one, but we were all in it together. It was just literally a weight came off my shoulders. I started tearing up, and it saved my life, that exact first meeting. So very much resonated with me when you mentioned that part. Actually, let's go back into the justification, because you said like the way the brain works, the way your brain works when you're saying to yourself, oh, limoncello is great to have after dinner, and you're still like making those justifications, even though you're that far gone, 2 bottles of wine in, isn't it just, it's curious how that addict part of a brain can like really do a sell job on some of the stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And, there is research that it can be just a physical manifestation, right? And I'm sure you know a lot more of this than I do, but, we just cannot stop once we start, right? Like, there is some level of like, oh, but there's a lot of things, right? Oh, but I deserve it.
Yes.
Oh, but, the bottle's already open. Right? Like, oh, it'll go bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't find the cork, so I can't put it back on, or, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like, we just want to drink because we're alcoholics. Like, once we start, we cannot stop.
Yeah.
Right. Or for the most part. I mean, if you're like, anyway, maybe not for everyone, but if you're an alcoholic like me, and that's why, I choose like complete abstinence, because I don't think I can even get to the place where I could have 1 or 2. I think I'd just be back off to the races. Right. And I think there are people who can go back out, like women who go back out and drink like a lady, and we're like, hey, I just had too much. But I was in my 40s by the time I came in. I had 30 years of experience with, I never moderated. And once that was pointed out to me, right, that's one of the key signs of alcoholism, was when you start, you can't stop. Because I never really understood. I never understood that. I was like, oh, wait, there's people who stop and they're like, yeah. And I remember I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't get that. There's always an excuse, and it's always a really good excuse to keep drinking.
Oh yeah. And could be, and it could be like a multi-level, excuse. There could be all these like, or it could be the most simple thing. Like I can't find the cork, like you said, right? They could be like, anything in that spectrum of like this complex, or just, hey, I deserve it, or hey, I forgot the cork, or exactly. So
it's owed to me. If you knew what my life was like, you drink too. And you're like, okay. There's people have yes.
There's a lot. Exactly. There's a lot of entitlement. There's a lot of, victim-y kind of stuff, right? Like, for sure. I get that. It's all
just ego, right?
Yeah, right.
It's all ego. It's I deserve it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, we do deserve a lot, but we don't deserve to, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's escape. It's all escapism.
Avoid it.
I'm scared. Yeah. I'm scared of what the world looks like, and I don't know what to do. And so I'm going to put my head in the sand, but but then I can still hear it in my head. So I have to put substances in it to make my head stop, because the hamster won't stop.
Yeah.
It just won't stop. And the only thing that's going to make it stop is a drink. And I have to keep drinking until the hamster stops.
Yes.
Just long enough that I feel like I can have some relief,
right? And we'll get into that. I want to know how you find relief these days. But before I do, just a couple other topics that came up in your story. This whole idea of like the overachiever to a degree, this need for achievement, to perhaps prove yourself, or prove to yourself, or prove to others, or however you frame that to yourself. How do you What is your relationship with your inner achiever these days? I imagine much more healthy. I'm seeing it because like I know it shows up in my life. That was something that I discovered well into my sobriety, that I was using that achiever to that was like my part of my personality that was now pushing those feelings down. If I started feeling uncomfortable, I go online and, do some kind of post or do something that externally I could feel validated by or whatever. So I'm just kind of curious, like how that achiever side of you shows up now,
Yeah.
now that you're sober and you have a more of a conscious control or relationship with it, we'll call it.
Yeah. Well, and then, you add on the layer of being an entrepreneur, right? Because you don't have anybody else to really, you don't have the level of accountability. You don't have the level
Sure.
of like social mores around you that you do working in the corporate world, right? Where
Right.
like it's not appropriate for you to get lost in checking Instagram over and over and over again for an
Sure.
hour to see if anyone else liked your post to give you external validation, right? Because
Right.
your boss is knocking on your door, the phone rings or whatever, right? When you're an entrepreneur, and of course, hopefully we all have businesses that are busy that you really can't do that, but it's that idea of it's even more complex for entrepreneurs. And so and we'll talk about this later, but I'm a marketing coach for entrepreneurs, and I work with a lot of people in recovery. And the reason why is we have just a very different mindset sometimes when it comes to that, right? We have additional mental work that we have to go through. And for me, the really big shift in my career side, right, the ambitious side, has been a shift from making it about feeding my ego to making it about feeding what I believe is, the universe's will for me. So, every day I, get up in the morning, I read some spiritual literature, often 12-step, some 12-step based things. I've done a codependency training as well, a 12-step program as well. So I read a codependency piece. I do a journaling, exercise every single day where I do, what did I do well yesterday? What did I not? Do I owe an amends? I do a gratitude list, and then I set my intentions for the day. And then I kind of map out my day. And part of that, I also meditate pretty much every day. And what I try to do in that is to make myself right-sized and available to hear what the universe wants me to do to be the best spiritual benefit of everyone around me, not just me. It's not, how do you help me today? How do I get what I want? It has shifted for me to, how do I help everyone around me to get everything that they want? Right? How do I help everyone around me live their biggest and best and healthiest and most vibrant and most aligned selves? Right? And that shift it takes work, right? It's not one of those things that it's like, you don't have like a burning bush moment, right? Where you're like, oh, now I have all my focus on other people, right? I mean, I literally have to sort of throughout the day, and even like before I came on this podcast, right? Just taking a moment and saying, please guide my thoughts and make sure that I say everything that you want me to say for the spiritual benefit of all beings, right? I'm the vessel for it. And putting that first, I find that I still get all the other material stuff that I wanted, before, but I'm doing it from a very different perspective and from a place that's much more peaceful, and a place too that, if something doesn't work, I can understand that the contrast, if you listen to Abraham Hicks, she talks a lot about contrast, right? And the contrast that comes in is there to teach me. It's not me being a failure, right? It's just me, it's me being on my path, right? And so making it less about me and more about, how do I fit into this overall universal scheme? And how do I just be another bozo on the bus, right? How do I just, it's not about me. It's not about me being better. It doesn't matter where I sit on the bus. It doesn't matter if I sit in the front seat, where the dorks sit, right? Which is, I sat in the front of the bus for a long time, or the back of the bus where the cool kids who smoked sat, and I've sat on those seats too, right? Doesn't matter where I sit, doesn't matter where we're going. We're all just bozos on the bus. And how can I make that journey the best possible with all the skills that I have been given?
Yeah, beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. That actually segues quite nicely into what I was going to say. It was one of the first things that you had mentioned is you were living in this constant fear or uncertainty of sort of where you were placed. And I think that's super relatable to a lot of people, growing up in that, say the awkward teenager years, myself included, right? I never quite felt like I had one foot in sort of every group or archetype.
Mm.
And just how you're describing it now, it's like, just being comfortable with that, championing that about yourself, right? So that would be my next follow-up question, going a little bit deeper, is like, do you have that sort of sense of longing to belong or fear? Is that still in you, or is that something that you've allowed to come up and alchemize? Like, it sounds like you have by what you just mentioned about the bozo on the bus thing, but where does that show up for you these days, that sort of early fear that you had of like not being enough or not fitting in?
Yeah, we all have like, and I love those cartoons, right, where there's like the devil on your shoulder and like the aligned, goddess side, and then like
Yeah.
your little devil on the other side, right? And the devil has not gone away. And I think part of being in the human experience is that it's never going to go away, right? I would like to say that I'm aligned at all times, and I feel that the universe is constantly supporting me, and that everywhere I go, I'm loved. And no, I don't feel
Yeah.
like that. I still feel like, the dorky kid who was sort of in all the groups, but the reason why I wasn't in all the groups was because nobody actually really liked me. And, and if you still go to, like, I still go to a lot of 12-step meetings. I mean, and I still feel like, did I dress right? Oh my God, I have to shift. So am I going to get in this person's space? And then are they going to be annoyed with me? And then am I going to be on the resentment list tomorrow? And, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I have to leave early and then I'm going to bother everyone. And, and it's
Yeah.
just, I always feel a little awkward. I always feel like maybe I'm being too much, or maybe I'm not being enough, or whatever. And I've gotten to the place of acceptance with it. I'm not sure it's ever going to go away. I actually think that I have moved it to being my superpower. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do in recovery, is taking our character defects. And yes, there's give them up to the universe, but I also think turning them around and saying, this is my superpower, because I can walk into any room and I don't walk in going, hey, which is what I did when I was drinking, because drinking let me do that. But I can walk into any room and go, everybody in this room feels like a complete dork right now. And so my job is to just approach everyone else in the room like, hey, I know you feel like a total dork, so like, let's be friends so we don't feel
Very
so
cool.
dorky together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, when you see it that way, and when you're willing to talk about, you just feel weird and insecure all the time. And that being in recovery is the first time I've heard other people share that. Right. And I was like, it made me be willing to say, oh my God, nobody feels comfortable ever in their own skin. And I have moments of it, but I see that as a superpower now. Right. I think it's one of the things I hope that makes me accessible to a lot of people, because they can see that I really just feel like I'm a giant dork. I mean, I might look good. I mean, I was always like that too. Right? I always kind of look good, but on the outside, I could put the outside together real good. Right. I was a professional actress. I was a model.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like underneath here, it's like dirty hair and like, pink eye.
Right.
And, but you throw in a hat and you go, and you treat other people like they feel like they're dorks too. And that makes a huge difference in the way that you can relate to other people. Cause I could never felt like I could relate to other people.
Yeah. That's, again, beautiful answer. And this not very naturally segues into the next thing I was asking about, just the topic of authenticity and the way it comes up in recovery. And the way that I worded it is like, I felt as soon as I got into a room, or if I was speaking with just somebody like you and I are talking now, the need for my ego or persona just melts away. And then there's this you get me, I get you. And I kind of, I could see it being articulated. I'd articulate it differently, but I like the way that you say, like the dork, and relating to somebody on that level, and then just being able to like resonate or, harmonize with a person on that level, versus like the need for this small talk or this banter that's so forced that the other person knows and they kind of throw it back. You're not really having an authentic conversation. Whereas if you just go in there with that mindset that you just talked about, you can just hit somebody and go, holy shit. Oh, like, you understand me, or like, you're not just in it for the small talk. I can actually talk to you and connect with you right off the bat. So that's kind of the way that I view authenticity now. And I know it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, nowadays. I want to be my authentic self and such. But having said that, like, what is your authenticity? What is it to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people talk about authenticity as a way of, I want to do whatever the fuck I want to do, and you're going to have to deal with it. Right.
Bingo.
I mean, that
Ooh,
is a
that's
lot
good.
of this authenticity talk that's
Hell
out
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
not about really being, me being authentic is really holding space for you to be authentic.
Ooh, that's
Right.
great.
And so, yeah, this whole like, well, if I want to wear this, I'm going to wear this. And right. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's great. Right. Like,
Sure.
I
Sure.
get that. Right. Like, I think if you want to get a tattoo, get a tattoo. If you want to wear a bright orange hat, where, you want to, like, all that stuff, right, it's two things. One is not worrying about what other people think, because what they think of you is none of your business.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I talk to people in early recovery, and entrepreneurs, like, it's funny how much we take our recovery into our, for me, at least in our business lives. I'm like, what other people think of you is none of your business, right? Your job is to go out there, be of maximum service, to try to help other people with the skills that you were given. And if they like you, they like you. And if they don't, they don't. Mm-hmm. That's authenticity. It's not, well, screw you, right? It's coming from a mood of service. It's coming from a mood of, if I'm authentic, then that means you get to be authentic too. If I'm vulnerable, then that lets you be vulnerable too. And that's something that we have so little of in our world. And I think that's one of the things that I try to be, is like, if I'm willing to talk about my, my recovery journey, my divorce, as I have, a few of them, right? My whatever struggles I have, the more authentically I'm willing to talk about them from a real place of vulnerability, not from a screw you, because when you're doing it from a screw you, you're actually just feeding your ego. Right. Because you want, it's Madonna, right? It's like, give me feedback for my over the topness.
Right.
As opposed to, like, I'm going to enter this space where, in a way where I'm the most comfortable, where I'm the most vulnerable, where I'm the most open, so that I can allow you to be your most open and vulnerable, and whatever that means to you, right? If that means that you burp in the middle of a conversation, cool, because I'm going to burp in the middle of a conversation, because I'm going to let myself be that. And so to me, that's what authenticity is, right? It's not about the ego, it's about a mood of service.
I love it. Yeah. And it's like, when I even gestures like that of like whatever it is you mentioned, burping in a conversation, it's like permission, right? So if somebody's or if you say, hey, I'm uncomfortable. If I go to like a gathering, I'm like, I'm a little bit uncomfortable right now, I'm gonna be honest. It's or to harken back to like your recovery story. You saw somebody saying that I'm 90 days sober. Bingo, boom. That was like your gateway in. And that person didn't necessarily have to do that, but they're being vulnerable, being authentic. Hey, I'm putting this out there, and that's that harmonized with you, or resonated, or however you want to word it. And then bingo. So, that's the importance of doing it. Just on a side note too, like when you're saying somebody's like, the F you, this is my authentic self. Right. I think we all know, and you mentioned it's the ego. I think we all know well enough that that person is doing that to hide, a hurt or something that they, they've been rejected somewhere. So now they're doing that to overcompensate. So exactly. It's a tool of the ego, as opposed to, and then they're masking it with the word authentic. Right. So interesting.
I think you're hitting on a really important point, which is authenticity is us showing up without fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we show up without having any fear, in the most vulnerable way, possible, in the most naked way possible, right? Yeah. Without adding on any of the stuff that we used to have to add on to make ourselves feel okay, right? Whether that was the right clothes, or the right, way of talking, or the right whatever that is for you. However, you need to show up in a way where you're not showing up out of fear, but out of just genuine alignment, so that you can then serve. That's what it's all about. That's beautiful. And it's, we keep going back to the focusing on others, the focusing on service. And then the byproduct, and you mentioned it, in one of your answers earlier, the byproduct is you still get all these material things that you want, but it's like, that's the byproduct as opposed to the focus. And this is what you're focusing on. And then that's where the ego and the selfishness potentially comes out.
you're focusing on other people and the service and all that, which allows you to drop into that authentic mode. And then the byproduct, you just so happen to be like successful because you're living, you're in alignment with why you're here. You're having fun doing it. You're feeling fulfilled. You're enjoying the process, the journey, as opposed to these destinations that are, external things and all that. So yeah, very, very cool conversation. And I like how we've this picture that we've painted so far.
Yeah. It's not easy. I mean, all of this stuff, like, it's so easy to be like, show up as your most authentic, aligned self. Like,
of course.
I probably have to spend 2 hours every day, right? Like just getting up, getting the, I'm not a coffee drinker, but a tea drinker, right? Drinking the tea, doing my writing, right? Like checking in with my sponsees, setting my, meditating, right? Planning out my day from that place, constant, coming back to that, right? Doing things like this that are, this is service to me, right? The more I feel like the more we're willing to tell our stories, the more other people are going to be willing to tell their stories. And if that teacher hadn't posted that she was 90 days sober, then I wouldn't be where I am today. I mean, my life would be completely different. And that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have found recovery, but I don't think I would have found it that quickly. And I just am so grateful for that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I think we've touched on a lot of the what you are doing these days to just to maintain that recovery. In fact, you just mentioned it. It sounds like you have a great morning routine and different things and checkpoints throughout the day to do so. Excuse me, speaking of burping in the middle of a conversation, a little bubbly water.
Some bubbly.
It definitely was.
Oh my God, you're such a good alcoholic.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, that carbonated. I still love the opening of a can. Come on, I'm always gonna like that. Yes,
that's the best debate to have with a party full of alcoholics. Right? Is LaCroix or bubbly?
Ooh, okay. So, let's get into it. Are you a LaCroix person, or are you a bubbly person, or are you both?
I guess both.
Okay.
I drank so much club soda in early sobriety, as we all do, because we just need to taste something different.
100%.
I just got so bloated, I stopped drinking it. So I've I had to do a second recovery with club soda.
Club soda recovery. Yeah. Oh man. Is there a 12-step for that one?
I know. We should make one.
Yes. 12-step for club soda.
That's the next part of your business model, Matt.
I love this. Yeah. You're talking about niche market. There we go. This is right. That's yes, we'll see how many people sign up for that one. That's hilarious. And that's great though, in all seriousness, everything that you've done to maintain your recovery. It's wonderful. I want to, give a space for you to actually speak to what you're doing. The show is called Beyond Recovery. I love having people with their success stories of what they're doing nowadays. You've been an entrepreneur, but what is it looking like for you nowadays? We talked about it at the beginning, marketing. So there's a lot of people that listen that are different coaches and such. And I would love it if you just gave a sort of a breakdown of what your marketing background is and what you're doing with that. And then we can get into where we can find you online as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I will say, so I am an entrepreneur now, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but when I first got sober, I had the opportunity to not have to work for a while. I mentioned I got divorced. I had a little bit of a settlement from that and some child support. And so I was able to really just focus on my recovery for the first year and a half. And because I had my own entrepreneurial venture before that. I was a photographer for many years. And, and then before that, I was in the corporate world for 20 years doing marketing. And so I took a year or so to really focus on my sobriety. I took 6 months to figure out, do I build my photography business again, or do I do something else? And I think sometimes it's real hard for us as entrepreneurs to be willing to go back to the corporate world. But I can tell you again, with full vulnerability and desire to tell stories as a way to give you guys, the comfort to do it too. I went back to corporate. I got to a place where, it's like, I'm a year and a half sober. I'm just learning how to build my life again. I barely, I felt like my brain had just barely turned back on. And I'm like, I need somebody else to tell me what to do for a while.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. So I went back to the corporate world for about 3 years, and it was the best thing I ever could have done, because I needed a habit. I needed a routine. I needed to get back into that, because I think often in early recovery, it's very difficult for us to manage our own lives on a day-to-day basis, right? Especially if we got to a place like I did the first few years before sobriety, where there was no rhythm in my life, right?
Right.
So I think there's something to be said for that, but there also is something amazing about being an entrepreneur. And so about 2 years ago, I felt called and had been feeling called for a while to go back and do something on my own. And I knew it wasn't necessarily photography. I wasn't really, I knew it wasn't just that. I have a bad shoulder. And so it wasn't going to necessarily be that, though I still shoot. But I love marketing. And I took a class at like a certification course at Yale. And I loved it. And I was like, this is what I want to teach. Right. And so the pandemic came about 6 months later, and the phone started ringing, right? All my friends were getting laid off, right? Seeing the pandemic as an opportunity, like, oh my God, I can finally go start my own business for the first time, right? I don't want to live this life anymore. Oh my God, I stopped commuting. And now I realize I don't ever want to do that again. I don't ever want to go back and work for someone, right? We had this huge entrepreneurial boom during COVID. And I think that was one of the most beautiful things that came out of COVID. And COVID was awful, but there were so many beautiful things that came out of it too. And I think that was one of them. And I was right there with them, right? I was like, God, this is something I really wanted to do for a while. So the phone starts ringing. It was all these people who I knew from my network and were like, I want to go start my own business. What do I do? How do I get clients? How do I market myself? What do I do? And I realized, like, oh, I have a business. There's a business here. Let's do it.
Yes. Yeah.
So COVID, I left my job and had an opportunity to take a layoff, and left and started this business a little over 2 years ago. And I help to support entrepreneurs who don't really know anything about marketing figure out how to market their business. And so it's primarily one-on-one mentorship, where I just kind of hang out with them and, all right, you and I were doing it a little bit before, before we started chatting, like, hey, how do I bring in leads? Or I've gotten to a place and I want to bring in new people, and how do I increase my visibility? And what does that look like? And some of it's social media, some of it's not, right?
Right.
And one of the things, because I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I still say 25 years because I don't want to admit that I'm this old, but almost 30 years, that I understand all the different types of things you can do in marketing, and that social media isn't the only way. It's an important way, especially right now, but it's not the only way. And so help to take kind of old school, marketing principles and teach them to a whole new group of entrepreneurs who maybe never learned that stuff, right? I mean, my clients are, athletes who opened gyms or who are trainers now. They are attorneys, right? They're great lawyers. They got no idea, they don't know how to market themselves, right? There's doctors, there's coaches, right? Who are incredible at their craft, but don't know how to market themselves. And so, it's so fun. I love it. I really started this business from a place of service. And I teach that to my clients. So it's been a really interesting, how do I live my life now? How do I spend a few years like really implementing what a recovery life looks like? And now I find that I just teach recovery to people all day long, right? It's like Gabby Bernstein or Brene Brown, right? They're just teaching recovery to everybody. They just don't know it.
Right.
And so, I talk to them about, like, my marketing plans all start with rooting, right? Rooting in who you are, service. How do you serve other people? And then attracting. And I spend a lot of people, we talk in all of my training programs or my one-on-one about how do you create content for your clients? Well, the first thing you do is ask what they need, right? How can you come to them from a mood of service? What is your person struggling with? And that's just all that stuff is just stuff that I learned in recovery. Right?
Wow.
How do I enter a room, not with a, what do I need, but from a, what do you need? And how can I be of service to you?
Wow.
And teaching that to entrepreneurs as a way to grow and build their business. And so it's so fun. I just can't believe I get to do this every day.
Isn't that interesting? And thank you for providing the backstory. Stories are so important and like you say, if somebody's hearing this and, I think it was called, is it like the Great Resignation? Like the whole thing where like so many people quit their day jobs during COVID. It was like millions of people, literally. It wasn't just, like a pocket of people, like literally millions of people, like betting on themselves, that whole romantic side of it, just taking the advantage. They're already working from home. So they're like, what's the difference? I'll just, you know what I mean? Go do my own venture. So this, yeah, filling in that side of things. Thanks for taking the time to do that as well. I appreciate that.
But it's hard. It's not easy. And it's not easy to be, self-motivated when you don't have a boss and you don't have, that's sort of the role that I fill for a lot of people is I'm their
Gotcha.
accountability buddy, right? And I end up
Uh-huh.
not their boss, but you want somebody. And I always have had a coach through my entire, entrepreneurial journey is like, I
Right.
need somebody who's going to call me, my coach just sent me a note, like, what's going on with this project? You're like,
It's nice though, right? Yeah.
fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
need that, especially people in
Yes.
recovery. Like
Yeah.
we need some accountability. We need some of that. And it's hard, we don't have a lot of that. And I think it's interesting. And you were just talking about the Great Resignation. I was thinking, we're entering year 3 for a lot of the businesses that started there, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
into year 3, a lot of the businesses that started then, and this is where the rubber meets the road, right? And I
Yeah.
was in a call the other day, a networking meeting, and there were a bunch of women in there who were like, if I don't make it this year, I'm out. Like this has to
Yeah.
happen.
Sure.
Because the
Sure.
first year you lose money, the
Mhm.
second year you break even, and the third year you should start making money.
Right.
But a lot of them never really learned how to market their business from the beginning. And so now they're sort of like, okay, this is my make or break year, right? And I'm finding a lot more, my phone's ringing a lot more, which I'm so grateful for, but with people who are like, all right, I'm in year 3 and I really need to amp it up, right? We were
Right.
talking about that earlier,
Yeah, we
right? Like
were. Yeah.
I'm at that stage where I need to amp it up. And what does that look like,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that was wanted to mention is very cool. It's so hand in hand with just your vibe and your story and everything. It's like the parallels of recovery that you're seeing echo into your career, that being marketing, as far as the service base and the way that you're approaching it. I thought that was really cool observation or perspective that you have. So, and it's like, so it's yeah, very neat, very cool. And just goes into that authentic and just having everything kind of like all your energy centered in this instead of having this scattered periphery of different things, like, which is definitely what I had before, and that's definitely what I'm working towards. I have a lot of respect for. It's kind of like an artistic way of or creative way of seeing all these elements of your life coming together in one ball of energy moving in the same direction. So yeah, really cool. Thanks for sharing that as well.
Yeah. And I think it's the way that the universe sees us, right? The universe
Right.
or higher power, whatever, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
see us as this one little ball of energy and it all ties together. They're just waiting for us to figure it out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's great stuff. And, Sherry, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, as well as, what you're doing with your business and everything. And I think there's going to be a lot of people just from the, you sharing your story and then sharing the origins of your business as well, that are going to resonate with people. So if somebody is wanting to reach out to you, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you online?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. It's Didi, DIDI .marketing.collective. My website is DIDI.marketing. You can email me if you're like still in the email. Do people still email? They might still email.
Yeah.
It's Sherry, SHERRY @Didi.marketing. And can I share the background on the name of my company? Because I think
Please do. Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. So Didi is a term that women use for each other in India and Nepal. So
Oh.
when you walk through the streets of Nepal, women will greet each other with namaste, which kind of means hello. We've all heard namaste, right? They'll say like namaste Didi, namaste Didi.
Okay.
And I just loved that. I felt it's just one of those, like, you just feel so warm and accepted and like instantly loved, right? And it means older sister or revered aunt, right?
Oh, cool.
And so when I was thinking about what I really wanted to create in this business, this network of, people working together, this collective of people working together, all marketing their businesses, all really helping each other, being in a mood of service, being in a mood of namaste Didi, right? Like I bow to you, sister, right? Again, back to that idea of being another bozo on the bus, right? Let's all just be bozos on the bus together. That's really where the name came from. And I have an organization in Nepal that I donate 5% of all of our revenues to, that has a women's center that trains, these women who you meet on the streets and say namaste Didi, and it teaches them how to find economic independence. And so it all kind of ties together with our charitable giving initiative, again, all with the mood of service and of community, and let's all just do this together and lift each other up.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so, Sherry, we'll have everything, the ways to get a hold of you online, of course, your bio, which will be basically giving a summary or breakdown of everything that we discussed today. But, we had so many wonderful topics we jumped into. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on. More than welcome back. If there's anything at all that's coming up, whether you're releasing another book, another event coming up, doors always open. I'd love to have you back on. And any final words, not to put you on the spot, but I'll put you on the spot. Any final words for folks listening today before we wrap things up?
Well, thank you. And I really, just a thank you to you, having these conversations accessible for other people who might not be in recovery yet, right? Or thinking about it, or are in their own recovery journey and struggling with it, right? Having the ability to go online, find a podcast where you see success stories, right? Like you and like me, and that, we're constantly working at it, but having, you spend a lot of time doing this, right? And being of service to the people in this community by putting these stories out there is incredible. And so on behalf of everybody listening to this, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, wonderful. I think the beginning of a budding collaboration between you and I. Thank you so much. And yes, that's it for today, listeners. Thank you. And by all means, if you feel the need to reach out to Sherry, she seems very accessible, and give her a follow on Instagram. Very, very just charismatic, charming person. I love what you got going on there. Thank you so much, Sherry.